The next item on the agenda is the President's Report, and many people have been asking about the parking lot and the lawsuit with the Village of Brookfield. I got a call early last Tuesday morning from the local newspaper who informed me and provided me with the following. There was a motion by the Village of Brookfield Board to direct the attorney to convey a settlement proposal to Riverside Brookfield High School District 208. And at that point in time, President Ketchmark read the following. As a result of our discussions just concluded among the Board of Trustees in closed session, the Village of Brookfield is once again directing the village attorney to reach out to President Welch and the District 208 School Board to resolve the ongoing litigation regarding the Village Board of Trustees zoning decision concerning the construction of a new parking lot. As this matter goes on, the divide caused our community is evident. Much of it is fueled by misinformation or partial information, and while the school board or village board of trustees cannot simply pick a new option without allowing public comment through the legal zoning process, working towards a framework that works the best for all affected parties is the realistic approach. When this issue is ultimately resolved, the high school will remain where it's at, the Village of Brookfield will still be present, and the neighborhoods surrounding the school that are most affected will live with the results. We are directing the attorney to offer on behalf of the Village of Brookfield is to permit not to exceed 153 parking spots, including the Rockefeller lot and the proposed new lot. This option would include support for the zoning variation allowing the tennis courts to be rebuilt with the non-conforming fence, as well as for the special use permit to allow for additional parking. Because the school district's latest proposal contains an increased front yard setback that complies with the Village of Brookfield zoning code, no approval would be needed for the front yard setback. The village would support a streamlined zoning process for the special use permit. As part of the village's settlement proposal, the village would be willing to offer to grant the school district a 20-year lease extension for the use of Rockefeller Avenue, a public street, for dedicated student school parking at an annual cost of $1 per year. This lease renewal in itself offers the school district a savings of more than $250,000 over the course of the lease term. The village's settlement offer is open for acceptance by the school district until November 25th, 2016 at 5 p.m. Unfortunately, after that time, the legal process started by the school district will play out itself. While the litigation was filed by the school district, the village is confident that based upon the law and the facts of the case, the village will prevail. Should the village prevail, no additional parking at the high school would be the result. Because the addition of 45, 60, or 90 parking spots will not solve the traffic issues around the high school during special events and other peak times, the village remains willing to help work together with the Brookfield Zoo and Cook County to come to a resolution that better deals with the overall parking and traffic issues. And that was from the board meeting of the village board. On October 21st, 2016, I sent a letter to Kit Ketchmark at the Village of Brookfield, and I'll just read that for you. Dear Kit, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you and the Board of Trustees for reopening lines of communication on settlement of the zoning matter. The village has demonstrated its good faith interest in seeing this come to a prompt and mutually fair conclusion so that our boards can move on with other important endeavors and preserve taxpayer dollars. More specifically, our board appreciates 1, the offer of the rent reduction for Rockefeller Avenue. This cost savings is very important to the district, and we appreciate the initiative by the trustees on this issue. This will free up funds previously spent on parking for use on educational programs and help pay for the new traffic control measures to be implemented by the district as part of the settlement agreement. 2, The village's approach in setting a global number of 153 parking spaces in the district's parking lot and on Rockefeller Avenue. Our attorneys are seeking clarification on the approach through Mr. Romello, and specifically how the 153 spaces get apportioned between Rockefeller Avenue and the district's new parking lot. We are also hoping there is some small amount of flexibility on this number to accommodate handicapped and visitor parking while still limiting the number of student permits. Finally, we have a few matters regarding the provisions of the agreement and the lease for Rockefeller that our council has raised with Mr. Romello. We trust and hope that these will not be sticking points. Thank you for your consideration, and we look forward to hearing from you and the trustees through Mr. Romello on these matters in advance of our meeting on October 25th. And again, that was October 21st that I sent that letter, which brings us to tonight. And we have with us our attorney, and Dr. Skinkas will introduce her, and they can bring us up to speed on what's happened prior to this meeting.
Nikki Baser, if you'd like to come up to the front briefly. Nikki Baser is legal counsel for the district that's working on the case. And so Friday, Mike completed his letter, and we made sure that that got sent to the village and to the village manager prior to their meeting yesterday. The village attorney and our attorney, Mr. Faulkner and Ms. Baser, spoke, and our attorney informed them that the board would be interested in settling the case and the ongoing case with the 153 spots, and if they could consider 3 to 4 handicap spots to account for our parking lot and for handicap accessibility and handicap parking into the stadium, so that they were not part of the 153 taking any student or visitor spaces. And so that conversation occurred on Monday prior to the village meeting, and Nikki can update the board on where we're at thus far.
Yeah, thank you. So as Mr. Welch and Dr. Skinkas have said, we received that motion through the newspaper on the 11th. On the 13th, we actually received a formal written settlement agreement from the village that was for the lease on Rockefeller, and it indicated that it was for the 108 spaces on Rockefeller and for a 45-space parking lot. We then met with Mr. Romello because, for a couple of reasons, there were some issues having to do with the lease and the language of the agreement that we wanted to start working through with him. But we also were seeking clarification on the number, because as it turns out, there are not 108 spaces on Rockefeller, there are 103.
Two.
Right, 2 or 3. We put it at 3. We're currently being invoiced for 103, but when Rich Romello went out to walk the site, he said it was 102. So right now we're using the 102 or 103 number for Rockefeller. And so we requested clarification that we assumed that they would make up the balance of those spaces in the parking lot. In addition, we informed Mr. Romello that with a curb cut needed to build the parking lot, we were going to lose an additional 5 spaces on Rockefeller. So we were basically at 98 spaces or 97 spaces on Rockefeller, not 108. And so our assumption was that they would put the balance back into the new parking lot. But we wanted clarification. And then as Dr. Skinkas said, we asked for 3 additional spaces for handicapped accessible spaces. We learned from Mr. Romello today that not only will the village not give us the 3 accessible parking spaces, but they've now reduced the number of spaces from 153 to 148. So, we are at this point obviously disappointed with that statement from the village. Apparently they were in agreement to give us the 5 from the curb cut, but they would not rectify the issue of the miscalculation on Rockefeller, which was on their end. So we are at this point awaiting the revised formal agreement. We'd like to take a look at that and then discuss with the board our options, and obviously in closed session, and then decide how to proceed with the village, likely making our own final written offer at this point, based on what they've told us. So that brings us up to speed to where we are right
So
now.
let me see if I understand this, Nikki.
Sure.
They passed a resolution, at least as we've been told, to give us 153 spots, without indicating in that resolution where those spots would go. Now that we have come back to them and said, that's very interesting, we think we're close, could you please just give us an additional 3 for handicap? They're backtracking or saying they're going to backtrack?
That's correct. And in fact, not only in the motion did they say the 153, but the cumulative number based on the settlement agreement, the written settlement offer that they gave to us was 153, which is the number that we all have been working with. And again, our negotiation point, we assumed when we were discussing, is would they add those extra 3 accessible? And now, as you said, not only are they saying no to that, but now they've backtracked from the 153, and we're only at 148, 147.
So what we assumed was, and Mike responded in kind with that letter, which was a sign of good faith. I was very hopeful we would put an end to this very quickly, because nobody wants to be in litigation with a neighbor. But now I would hope that people listening to this, I would hope that if there are any village trustees out there for Brookfield who are listening to this, would reconsider their position. And I don't mean the one that they formally resolved, that they would stick with that, the one that they formally voted on, and that there appears to be no excuse for not knowing the numbers, that they would stick with that position rather than, take what I would find a very regretful backtrack on this. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. Would that be it then?
Yeah, at this point, the board will go into closed session and discuss what their strategies are and options are, but I think, when we originally received the 153, if we could address 3 handicap spaces, I think we were really close to getting this done and to a point to where it's really close to our last settlement offer.
And I, for one, really appreciated the proposal on the rent for Rockefeller. I viewed that, and again, I don't know if there was this much thought put into it by the Village of Brookfield trustees, I would hope so, but that was some understanding that we had spent a lot of money, and a lot of extra money at, in essence, the zoning and their engineers and other persons' request, when we probably way exceeded what we needed to do. So I took that also as a real good sign of good faith. And I'm optimistic that cooler heads will prevail on this and that we'll be able to resolve it.
Any other comments?
Any other comments from the board? Okay, seeing none,